The restaurant was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that carries a strange tension between comfort and curiosity. The rain had just stopped outside, leaving tiny drops clinging to the window like memories that refused to fade. Inside, soft music floated through the air, and the smell of fresh bread mixed with candle wax and roses. Sandra Bullock sat near the corner table, wearing a calm smile that hid 100 thoughts. She looked at the door every few seconds, pretending not to, but she was waiting. Her hands rested on the tablecloth, fingers gently tracing the edge of her glass. The light touched her face softly, revealing the kind of beauty that didn't try to impress anyone. It simply existed, quiet and sure. Then the door opened and he walked in. Keanu Reeves, the kind of man who never needed attention but always received it. He wore a black coat still wet from the drizzle, his hair slightly messy, his eyes calm but searching. For a second he stood at the door, scanning the room as if he was looking for something familiar, something safe. And then he saw her. When their eyes met, the world around them seemed to slow down. No one spoke, no one moved, yet something shifted between them. A quiet recognition, like two souls remembering a promise they once made in another time. Keanu walked toward her, and the sound of his footsteps on the wooden floor was steady, almost careful. When he reached the table, he smiled that small, warm smile that always made people feel they could trust him with their secrets. "You waited," he said softly. Sandra nodded. "You came." He took his seat across from her. For a while they didn't talk. The waiter arrived, placed 2 menus on the table, and disappeared as quickly as he came. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, the silence between them began to fill with unspoken words. Finally, Sandra broke it. "It's been years," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Too many," Keanu replied, his tone thoughtful, almost regretful. "But some things don't change." She looked at him carefully. "Like what?" "Like the way you look at me when you're hiding something," he said with a faint smile. She smiled back, but her eyes told a different story. "Maybe I'm just remembering too much." "Or maybe," he said gently, "you're remembering what you never got to say." That sentence hung in the air. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. The waiter returned with their food, placing plates of pasta and fresh bread between them. The candles flickered, and the light painted warm gold across the table. Sandra watched Keanu pick up his fork, cut a small piece, and then, without thinking too much, he leaned slightly forward. "Try this," he said softly. She hesitated. It was such a simple gesture, yet there was tenderness in the way he held the fork, in the way his eyes met hers without pressure or expectation. She leaned forward slowly, tasting the bite he offered. For a brief second, the noise of the world vanished, and then she smiled. It wasn't just a smile. It was something deeper, like gratitude, relief, and quiet joy all blending into one expression. Keanu watched her carefully, his eyes soft but full of emotion. He didn't speak, and neither did she. Sometimes silence said more than words ever could. After a moment, she whispered, "You still do that." "What?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Make people feel safe," she said, "even when they're breaking inside." He looked down, the corner of his lips tightening slightly. "Maybe that's why we always understood each other." Her gaze softened. "Did we? Or did we just pretend we did?" Keanu leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe both. Maybe pretending was our way of holding on." She looked away, her reflection faintly visible in the glass beside her. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the wet pavement. She could see people walking, laughing, moving forward while she sat there between the past and the present. "Sometimes I wonder," she said quietly, "what would have happened if I hadn't walked away that night?" Keanu looked at her, his eyes filled with something unspoken. "You had to," he said. "You were scared, I was too." She turned to him again. "You were never scared." "You think I wasn't?" he said, a quiet intensity in his tone. "You don't know how many nights I almost called you. How many times I stood outside your door and couldn't knock." Her hand froze on the table. "You came to my door?" He nodded once. "More than once, but every time I convinced myself you'd already moved on." The air between them thickened. The flicker of candlelight seemed to dance slower. Sandra's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. She smiled faintly, but her voice trembled when she spoke. "I waited for you," she said softly, "every single night for months. I used to leave the light on, thinking maybe." She didn't finish the sentence. "She didn't need to." Keanu looked at her and his jaw tightened slightly. His fingers brushed the tablecloth, stopping just short of touching her hand. He wanted to reach out, but the years between them held him back like an invisible wall. "We can't change the past," he said finally, "but maybe we can understand it now." Sandra nodded slowly. "Understanding doesn't erase pain." "No," he said quietly, "but it gives meaning to it." For a long while, neither of them spoke. The restaurant around them faded into the background. All that remained was the faint sound of rain returning outside and the steady rhythm of two hearts remembering what it meant to be close. Then the waiter approached again. "Dessert?" he asked politely. Keanu looked at Sandra. She gave a small smile. "Something sweet," she said. He nodded to the waiter. "2 slices of chocolate cake." As the waiter left, Sandra leaned her chin on her hand. "You remembered," she said quietly. "How could I forget?" he replied. "You once said chocolate cake makes everything less complicated." "It still does," she said with a small laugh. He smiled back, but behind that smile was a question neither had the courage to ask. When the cake arrived, Keanu again lifted his fork, cut a piece, and held it toward her just like before. This time she didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, took the bite, and smiled again, but there was moisture in her eyes. He looked at her closely. "What are you thinking?" "That some moments," she said softly, "are too fragile to explain. They just stay." Keanu's gaze lowered for a second. "And some people stay too, even when they're gone." The music shifted to a slower tune, almost melancholic. The lights dimmed slightly, and the reflection of the rain streaked across the windows once more. It felt like time itself had paused to watch them. Sandra spoke again, barely audible. "You know, I thought meeting you again would hurt, but it doesn't." He raised an eyebrow. "No, it feels like breathing after holding it too long." His lips curved into a small smile. "Then maybe we were never really apart." "Maybe," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "but maybe now we have to decide if we still want to be together." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Keanu's expression changed, still calm, but his eyes revealed something deeper, something almost afraid. He leaned forward slightly. "What if I said I never stopped wanting that?" She looked up sharply, her heart racing. Before she could answer, thunder rumbled louder outside and the lights flickered. The candles wavered. For a moment, everything in the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. And then the lights went out. The room fell into darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the city outside. A few gasps came from other tables. Someone laughed nervously. In the dim light, Sandra felt a hand brush hers. It was warm, steady, familiar. Keanu's voice came softly through the dark. "Don't move," he said gently. "I'm right here." And in that moment, no cameras, no crowd, no spotlight, only truth existed between them. The rain began again, tapping against the windows like the rhythm of an old song neither had forgotten. And Sandra Bullock, sitting in the quiet dark with Keanu Reeves beside her, whispered softly, almost to herself, "Maybe this is where it begins again." But outside the restaurant, beyond the soft light, a camera lens clicked quietly from the shadows. Someone was watching, and tomorrow morning the world would know. The morning after the sun rose slowly over Los Angeles, spilling golden light across the quiet streets. It was one of those mornings that should have felt peaceful, but peace was far away for both of them. Sandra Bullock's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. One message after another lit up her screen. Her agent, her publicist, friends she hadn't spoken to in months, and every message said the same thing. "Did you see it? It's everywhere. The photo." She finally opened one. There it was, splashed across every gossip site, news outlet, and trending page. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock caught in candlelight dinner. The picture was blurry but powerful. It showed her smiling softly as Keanu leaned forward, hand near hers, the dim light painting warmth across both faces. Another shot showed him feeding her a bite. It looked romantic, it looked real, and it looked exactly like what people wanted to believe. Her heart sank. She knew what was coming. Whispers would become stories, stories would become headlines, and headlines would become judgment. She placed her phone on the table, exhaled, and rubbed her temples. Across the city, Keanu sat on his balcony, holding his coffee but not drinking it. He had seen the same pictures an hour earlier. He had also seen the comments, people speculating, celebrating, doubting. Some said it was a movie stunt. Others said it was proof of something more. He didn't care about gossip. He cared about her. He thought about calling her, but what could he say? Sorry for being kind, sorry for not hiding. The thought felt absurd. They hadn't done anything wrong, yet somehow the world had turned a moment of peace into a story of scandal. By noon, the calls became impossible to ignore. Her manager finally reached her. "Sandra, listen to me. This is going viral. The studios are asking questions. They want to know if it's a project or if I'm dating him," she interrupted quietly. "Yes," came the answer, followed by a pause. "Are you?" Sandra didn't answer. She just stared out the window. The rain from last night had dried, but the streets still glistened under the sunlight. "Does it matter?" she asked finally. "It does to them," her manager said, "and to your next film." After the call ended, she sat there for a long time. People outside her home had already gathered, reporters, photographers, curious fans. She could hear their voices through the glass. The city was watching again. She didn't move, not yet. She thought about that quiet dinner, about the warmth in Keanu's eyes, about how genuine that night had felt. She had smiled not because of a scene, not because of performance, but because it was him. The man who had once waited outside her door and never knocked. In the afternoon, there was a knock at her door. Gentle, familiar. For a heartbeat, she thought she was imagining it. She walked slowly to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw him. Keanu stood there in a dark hoodie, sunglasses covering most of his face, but there was no mistaking him. He looked calm, but his posture carried the weight of what had happened. She opened the door halfway. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but you didn't answer my calls. I didn't know what to say." "Then say nothing," he said. "Just let me be here for a minute." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in quietly, careful not to draw the attention of the crowd outside. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of cameras clicking faintly through the walls reminded them they weren't alone. Finally, Sandra sighed. "It's everywhere," she said. "They think it means something." "Does it?" he asked gently. She looked at him sharply. "Keanu," he didn't look away, "it meant something to me." The room fell silent. The words hung there like fragile glass. She wanted to respond, but emotion caught in her throat. She turned toward the window instead, pretending to fix the curtain just to avoid his eyes. After a moment, she said quietly, "You know how this works. They'll twist it. They'll make it look like we planned this." "Let them," he said simply. "We know what it was." "You think that's enough?" she asked. "It's all we have," he replied. She turned to face him. "And what is this, Keanu? What are we doing?" He paused before answering. "Maybe we're just two people trying to find something real in a world that sells everything else." She blinked back a tear. "And if real isn't safe, then maybe it's still worth it." The sound of cameras outside grew louder. She closed her eyes. "They're not going to stop, you know. They'll wait for us to step out. They'll shout questions. They'll dig into everything we've ever said to each other." Keanu nodded. "I know. And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with you," he said softly. Her heart stuttered. She wanted to believe those words, but the fear inside her was louder. Years in the spotlight had taught her how fragile peace could be. She had seen how love stories became tabloids and how kindness was mistaken for romance. She sat down on the couch and looked at him. "You're not supposed to make it sound easy." "I'm not," he said. "I just think we've both spent too long letting fear decide what's worth feeling." She stared at him for a long time, and then quietly she said, "Sit down." He did. They sat side by side, not touching, just breathing. The sunlight shifted slowly across the floor. Outside, the noise of the crowd faded into a distant hum. For the first time since morning, she felt calm. After a while, Keanu spoke again. "Do you ever think about how strange it is, how we keep finding our way back to each other after all these years?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe we were never meant to say goodbye properly." "Maybe we never did," he said. They both laughed quietly, an almost sad kind of laugh. It felt human. It felt honest. Then his phone buzzed, a message from his manager. "Avoid her place, paparazzi waiting, keep distance until things cool down." He read it, then locked the screen without replying. Sandra noticed. "You should go," she said softly. He shook his head. "Not yet. You'll make it worse." "Maybe. But leaving now would feel like pretending again, and I'm tired of pretending." She looked at him, searching his face for hesitation. There was none. "You've changed," she said. "So have you," she smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what scares me. That we changed. That maybe we didn't," she said quietly. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window. He peeked through the curtain at the small crowd outside, cameras flashing, reporters waiting. "They won't stop until they get something," he said. "What if we give it to them?" she asked suddenly. He turned around. "What do you mean?" "A story," she said. "Not a lie, just something they can understand. If we stay silent, they'll fill the silence with noise." He nodded slowly. "You think talking will help?" "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it'll remind them we're still human." He looked at her thoughtfully. "You really want to face them?" She exhaled deeply. "No, but I think I have to." He walked closer. "Then we do it together." Her eyes met his. "You'd really stand next to me through this?" "I already am," he said softly. Before she could answer, there was a sudden knock again, louder this time. The kind that demanded attention. Her assistant's voice called from the other side. "Sandra, you need to see this, right now." She opened the door halfway, and her assistant held out a phone. "They're saying it's not just dinner. They're saying you and Keanu are doing a secret film." "Look," Sandra and Keanu glanced at the screen. Dozens of articles were already spreading the new rumor. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock reunited for Mystery Project. Insiders confirm it's more than friendship. He looked at her with a small, ironic smile. Well, he said softly, at least they changed the headline. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. So now we're working together again? Maybe we should, he said with a half smile. Give them something true for once. She looked at him, eyes shining with something between sadness and hope. You mean it? Why not? He said. We always made magic on screen. Maybe it's time to see if we can still do it. Her assistant looked between them, confused. Are you saying, Sandra turned to Keanu, if we do this, it's not just a film. It's going to bring everything back, the cameras, the noise, the expectations. He nodded. I know. She took a deep breath. Then we'll need a story worth all of that. Something honest, he said. Something about love, she whispered. Their eyes met, steady, unafraid this time. Outside, the crowd grew louder. Someone shouted their names. Cameras flashed through the curtain. Keanu stepped forward and quietly placed his hand over hers on the table. Then let's give them the truth, he said. And in that quiet moment, two hearts found a reason to try again. But neither of them knew that someone had already leaked a new set of photos, taken from inside the restaurant. Photos no one was supposed to have. And by tonight, the story would take a darker turn. The hidden lens the day had barely begun, yet chaos had already found its way into every corner of their lives. By sunrise, the leaked photos were everywhere, more intimate, more revealing, and far more dangerous than the first ones. These weren't just pictures from a distance. They were inside the restaurant, close shots, private angles. One photo even showed the moment Keanu had reached out and brushed a tear from Sandra's cheek. Another caught him whispering something to her, his expression raw, unguarded. The internet didn't wait to breathe before it burned. Headlines shouted the same question across every platform: who leaked the private photos? Keanu was in his car when his phone began vibrating nonstop. His agent's voice came through, tense and urgent. Keanu, you need to listen. This isn't just gossip anymore. The studio's lawyers are involved. That restaurant had privacy agreements with its guests, and someone sold footage from the security system. They're calling it a breach. Someone sold it? He repeated slowly, his tone steady but his heart pounding. Yes, his agent said. And the buyer isn't talking. Some say it came from inside the restaurant. Others think someone close to you tipped them off. Keanu's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Someone close to me? Or her? Came the quiet answer. He ended the call and sat there, staring at the street through the windshield. The morning light was harsh, slicing through the glass, revealing the storm that lived behind his calm face. He didn't care about the photos being public. What tore through him was the thought that someone they trusted had betrayed them. Across town, Sandra sat in a dimly lit room, staring at her laptop. Her team surrounded her, publicists, advisors, and lawyers all talking over one another. We need to release a statement, one said. No, silence is better. If she speaks now, it'll sound defensive, another argued. We can't ignore this, said a third. They're accusing her of staging it for publicity. Sandra closed the laptop suddenly. The noise stopped. Enough, she said softly. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the kind of strength that silences rooms. She looked at each of them in turn. This isn't about publicity, this is about trust. And I need to find out who did this. The room fell still. No one dared to speak. Finally, her assistant, a young woman named Claire, stepped forward hesitantly. There's something you should see, she said. She handed Sandra a folder. This came in through an anonymous email last night. I didn't open it until now. Sandra took the folder, her hands slightly trembling. Inside were printouts of emails, messages exchanged between a restaurant employee and an unknown contact. Attached were time-stamped images. Her heart froze. The dates matched the night she and Keanu had met. One line in the email stood out like fire on paper. The footage is worth more if they don't know it exists yet. Sandra stared at it, her jaw tightening. Who else saw this? Just me, Claire said softly. I didn't tell anyone, Sandra nodded slowly. Thank you. She looked around the room. Everyone else out. I need a moment. The room emptied quickly. When the door shut, Sandra exhaled deeply and picked up her phone. She dialed his number. He answered almost immediately. I saw the new photos, he said. We were set up, she said. Someone inside that restaurant sold everything. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then Keanu asked, Are you safe? She almost smiled at the question. I'm fine, she said softly. But this is bad, they're going to spin it. They'll say we staged it, or worse, that we lied about the project. Keanu's tone was firm. Then we tell the truth before they twist it. And what's the truth? She asked. That we had dinner, he said simply. and that we care about each other, nothing else. You think they'll believe that? Maybe not, he said quietly, but at least it'll be ours. That afternoon they agreed to meet again, but not at a restaurant this time. They chose a quiet art gallery on the edge of the city, closed for renovation. A mutual friend who owned the place gave them privacy. The gallery was empty except for soft light streaming through dusty windows and the faint smell of paint in the air. Sandra arrived first. She wore a simple gray coat, her hair tied back loosely. Her eyes looked tired but focused. She stood near a blank canvas on the wall as if it were a mirror of everything she couldn't say. Keanu arrived minutes later. He walked slowly toward her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You remembered," she said quietly. "Always," he replied, handing her one. They stood there for a moment, both unsure where to begin. Finally, she spoke. "It's strange, isn't it? How one quiet dinner can become a storm." "Truth rarely stays quiet for long," he said softly. "But this isn't truth anymore," she said. "It's noise," he nodded. "Then we make them listen to something real." She turned to face him. "You think we can?" "We have to," he said, "because if we don't, they'll own our story." She looked down at the coffee in her hands. "Part of me wants to disappear again, go somewhere no one knows me." He smiled faintly. "You said that once before. And you told me to stay," she said. "You said running doesn't heal anything." "I was right," he said gently. She looked at him then, really looked at him. "You always are." The air between them softened. Sunlight moved slowly across the floor. He took a step closer, his voice lower now. "We can't control what they see, but we can control what we stand for." "And what's that?" she asked. "Respect," he said. "Dignity, kindness. Everything this industry forgets when it smells a story." Her lips curved slightly. "You still sound like the man who never lets go of hope." "Hope's the only thing they can't sell," he said quietly. She smiled, shaking her head. "You really haven't changed." He looked at her with a soft, almost pained warmth. "And you still light up rooms even when you're breaking inside." Her breath caught for a second. Before she could answer, a faint sound came from the hallway, a creak of a door followed by hurried footsteps. Both turned toward the sound. Keanu moved first, walking toward the corridor. "Stay here," he whispered. "Keanu, it's fine," he said softly. He reached the hallway, the air suddenly colder there. A maintenance door stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open slowly. No one was inside, but a small red light blinked near the corner of the wall. A camera, he yanked it down instantly. It was small, hidden within a ceiling vent. Behind it, a wire led to a portable transmitter. Whoever had installed it knew exactly what they were doing. He brought it back to her. "They're still watching." Her face went pale. "You mean?" "Someone planted it here, probably the same person who sold the first footage." She swallowed hard. "How long do we keep paying for one dinner?" "Until we decide to stop being afraid," he said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's stop." They spent the next hour talking, not as celebrities. Not as co-stars, but as 2 people who wanted their truth back. They decided to hold a joint statement. Not through a press agent, not through social media, but live, face-to-face, unedited. Before they left the gallery, Keanu turned to her. "Whatever happens next, don't let them take your peace," she smiled faintly. "Peace feels impossible right now." "It isn't," he said. "We just have to choose it." As they stepped outside, the street was strangely quiet. But across town, the person who had placed that camera sat in a dark room, staring at a live feed on a laptop. They zoomed in on the moment Keanu touched Sandra's hand as they left the gallery. A quiet laugh escaped their lips, and then they hit upload, within minutes. A new headline exploded online. Exclusive footage. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock caught again. Secret meeting in hidden gallery. And this time, the story wasn't just about love. It was about betrayal. The betrayal revealed, the world had turned their quiet story into a wildfire. Every network, every online feed, every trending tag carried their names now. Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock. Secret meeting, hidden camera. Betrayal. What had begun as one quiet dinner had turned into a storm that refused to end. Keanu was sitting in his kitchen, the morning sun slipping across the counter like liquid gold. His phone vibrated again, messages, calls, notifications, but he ignored them all. The headlines didn't matter anymore. What mattered was finding out who had done this. His mind replayed the moments at the gallery, the hidden camera, the timing, the leaks. It was all too organized, too deliberate. Someone wasn't just trying to expose them, they were trying to break them. His doorbell rang. When he opened it, his manager stood there with a folder in hand. Her expression was sharp, exhausted. "You need to see this," she said quietly, stepping inside. She laid the folder on the table, flipping it open to reveal printed images. Freeze frames from the leaked videos. Timestamps, metadata, and a set of internal logs. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "From the gallery's security firm," she said. "The cameras weren't supposed to be active. Someone reconnected the system remotely using a private code." "Whose code?" he asked, voice low. She hesitated. "Someone connected to Sandra's team." The air thickened. Keanu's expression stayed calm, but his jaw tensed. "You're saying it came from her side?" "We can't be sure," she said carefully. "But the access ID traces back to an assistant account from her production office." He didn't speak for several seconds. His pulse stayed steady, but his eyes hardened. "Send me the name." She hesitated again. "Keanu, send it," he said quietly. She finally handed him a printed sheet. One name stood out: Claire Mitchell. He recognized it immediately. Claire, Sandra's assistant, the same woman who had brought her that anonymous folder 2 days ago. The same one who claimed to protect her? He closed the folder slowly. "Thank you," he said. "I'll handle it." Sandra was at home when her phone buzzed. A message from Keanu. "We need to talk, now, alone." Her heart skipped. The words were short but heavy. She sent back the address to her private garden studio, a quiet space she used when she needed peace. When he arrived, she was already there, sitting near the window with a cup of tea. Her expression softened when she saw him, but she could sense the storm behind his calm. "You found something?" she said quietly. He nodded once. "Claire." Her face changed instantly. "What about her?" "The leaks trace back to her account." For a moment, she just stared at him. Then she shook her head slowly. "No." She wouldn't. "The access ID is hers," he said. "The gallery system shows her credentials were used to reactivate the security feed. She had the code." Sandra stood up quickly, disbelief in her eyes. "She's been with me for years, Keanu." She wouldn't do this. "She's loyal." "Someone isn't," he said softly. "And the timing fits too perfectly." She paced the room, running a hand through her hair. "No, she warned me about the first leak. She gave me the folder. Maybe because she wanted you to trust her even more," he said. "So you'd never suspect her." The silence that followed was heavy. She looked at him, eyes filled with pain. "You really think she betrayed me?" He didn't answer right away. "I think someone used your trust," he said quietly. "And she's the only one who had access to all our meeting details." Sandra turned away, her voice trembling. "If this is true, she sold us for money." Keanu stepped closer. "We don't know why yet, but we'll find out." "No," she said firmly. "I'll find out." That evening, Sandra called Claire to the studio. Her tone over the phone was calm, almost too calm. "Can you come over? I need to talk about tomorrow's schedule." "Of course," Claire said cheerfully. When she arrived, Sandra was waiting by the window, arms folded. There was no tea this time, no warmth in her eyes, just quiet strength. "Sit down," she said. Claire hesitated but obeyed. "Is everything okay?" Sandra studied her for a long moment before sliding the folder across the table. "These are system logs from the gallery. Your access ID was used to reconnect the cameras. Do you want to tell me why?" The color drained from Claire's face. "What? No, that's impossible." "I didn't." "Don't lie," Sandra interrupted quietly. "Please, not to me." Claire's hands shook slightly. "Sandra, I swear, I didn't mean for it to happen this way." "So you did do it," Sandra said, her voice soft but sharp. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "They reached out to me months ago. A journalist. He said he just wanted harmless pictures. I thought it would help your image, make people see you again the way they used to. Then it got out of control. They offered money and You sold us," Sandra said. "You sold him." "You sold me." "No," Claire said desperately. "I didn't know they'd twist it. I didn't know they'd follow you to the gallery." "But you took the money," Sandra said quietly. Claire broke down. "I made a mistake. I thought it would go away." Sandra closed her eyes for a long moment, her voice breaking when she finally spoke. You didn't just leak a story, Claire. You took something real and turned it into a headline. Claire reached out. Please, just let me explain. But Sandra stepped back. There's nothing left to explain. The assistant stood frozen for a moment, tears running down her cheeks. I'll resign, she said softly. I'm sorry. You already left, Sandra said quietly. The moment you hit send. When Claire left the studio, the door closed with a sound that echoed like an ending. Sandra stood alone for a long while, then finally sat down. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone. She typed one message. You were right. Keanu arrived 20 minutes later. The city was quiet outside, the air heavy with rain again. He stepped in, saw the look on her face, and understood without her saying a word. She admitted it? He asked softly. She nodded. She said it started months ago. She thought she was helping me, he sighed. Betrayal never starts as betrayal. It starts as justification. She looked at him, her eyes tired. Why does it hurt so much? Because trust doesn't grow back easily, he said. She sat down on the couch, staring at nothing. You know, I thought losing privacy would be the worst part of this. But it's not. It's losing faith. He sat beside her, not too close, just enough for her to feel presence instead of pity. Faith can return, he said quietly. It just takes time. She looked up at him, her expression softening. You really believe that? I have to, he said. Otherwise, what's left? She gave a faint, sad smile. You always find light in the ruins, he smiled slightly. Someone has to. They sat in silence for a while. The rain started again, soft and rhythmic, almost comforting. Outside, flashes of lightning brightened the window for brief moments before fading back into gray. Then her phone buzzed again. She frowned and picked it up. A new message from an unknown number. The truth isn't done yet. There's more. She showed it to him. What does that mean? He looked at it carefully. It means whoever started this still isn't finished. The phone buzzed again. Another message appeared, this time with an attached video. She hesitated, then pressed play. The screen lit up with footage neither of them expected. It wasn't from the restaurant. It wasn't from the gallery. It was from her home. Someone had filmed through her garden window. The angle was distant, but clear enough to show her and Keanu sitting on the couch earlier that day. Talking, close, vulnerable. Her hands went cold. They're inside my world now, she whispered. Keanu took the phone, his eyes narrowing. Then it's time we stop waiting for peace. What are you saying? She asked. I'm saying we find them, he said firmly. And we end this before they take anything else. She looked at him, fear and trust mingling in her eyes. You mean confront them? No, he said, standing up. I mean expose them. His tone was steady, but his eyes burned with resolve. For the first time in weeks, Sandra saw the man who didn't run from pain, but turned it into purpose. She rose slowly. Together? Always, he said. And somewhere, in another part of the city, the same anonymous sender watched their reaction on a live feed, smiling in the dark. The voice whispered softly into the phone. Let's see how far they'll go for the truth. The night after the new video leak, Los Angeles felt heavier than ever. For years, Sandra had known how to handle the press, the cameras, the gossip, but this was different. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about invasion. Someone had crossed a line so deep that even the air inside her home no longer felt safe. She hadn't slept. The video kept replaying in her mind, her own home, her private sanctuary, filmed without her knowledge. It felt like someone had broken into her soul and stolen something. Like someone had broken into her soul and stolen something sacred. Keanu had stayed awake too, sitting on his apartment floor with a map of connections spread before him. Names, timelines, and contacts who might have had access to either the restaurant, the gallery, or her house. The more he looked at it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just one person. It was organized, planned, targeted. By morning, he drove to her place again, wearing a dark cap and hoodie to avoid the cameras still waiting near her gates. When she opened the door, he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. You didn't sleep, he said softly. Neither did you, she replied. He smiled faintly. You're right. They sat in the living room, the blinds closed, phones turned off. For the first time, there was no media noise, no phones buzzing, only the steady rhythm of their breath and the faint hum of distant traffic. "I think I found something," Keanu said, unfolding a paper on the table. It was a printed list of security service providers. One company name was circled, Greyline Media Systems. "What's that?" she asked. "They handle surveillance contracts for a few restaurants and galleries in the city," he explained. "And guess what? They also worked on the renovation of this house 3 years ago." She frowned. "You're saying they might still have remote access?" He nodded. "If someone inside that company sold footage, they could have been using the same hidden feeds to watch everything since day one." Sandra leaned back, covering her face with her hands. "So it wasn't just Claire, she was just the messenger." "Exactly," he said. "Someone higher up was pulling the strings." She looked at him with quiet fear. "Why us?" "Because we sell," he said simply. "The world still loves the idea of us. Every rumor, every smile, it becomes a headline, and someone's cashing in on that." She nodded slowly. "Then we find them." "Yes," he said, "but not through lawyers, not yet. This has to be quiet. We can't alert them." She studied him carefully. "You've done this before, haven't you?" He smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've learned how to read people who hide behind cameras." They started with silence. For 2 days, neither posted anything, neither appeared in public. They let the world assume they were hiding. In reality, they were moving carefully, talking to people off record, tracing digital footprints, checking old emails and invoices. On the third night, Sandra found something. An archived message from Greyline Systems, dated 18 months ago. It was a reminder email about system maintenance, and attached was a CC list of recipients. Most were generic company names, but one address caught her eye. nlatham@silverframeupper.com. She showed it to Keanu. "This name doesn't belong here." He looked it up. Silverframe PR, a major Hollywood publicity firm known for handling controversial press leaks and viral marketing. His eyes narrowed. "They're behind dozens of media exclusives. And look at this." He pulled up an old article on his tablet. "One of their senior strategists used to work with your studio." "You mean someone inside Hollywood sold us out to create a scandal?" "Not just a scandal," he said quietly. "A campaign." "But why?" she asked, frustration and disbelief filling her voice. "Because nothing sells like innocence turned into rumor," he said. "And you and I, we were the perfect story." She shook her head. "So we're just characters in someone else's game." He looked at her gently. "Not anymore." That evening, they went to meet a former technician from Greyline who had agreed to talk off the record. They met in a quiet parking lot near a closed diner, the kind of place where no one asked questions. The man, older and nervous, sat in his car with the engine running. When they approached, he rolled down the window slightly. "You didn't get this from me," he said quickly. "But yeah, Greyline's feed got cloned. Someone outside the company paid to copy access to a few systems, including hers." He nodded toward Sandra. "Who paid?" Keanu asked. The man hesitated, looking around. "I don't know their real name. They used a proxy account, but the payment came from an agency bank linked to a company called Silver Frame." Keanu exchanged a look with Sandra. "And the leak? They didn't want money right away," the man said. "They wanted timing. First leak small, second leak emotional, third leak scandal, pattern marketing. They were building anticipation like a movie release." "They turned our lives into a marketing timeline," Sandra whispered. The man nodded quickly. "And one more thing, someone from your personal circle gave them early cues. They called her the anchor." Sandra's heart sank. The anchor. She was supposed to guide the narrative. "Tell them when you'd meet, where, how to shape the emotion." Keanu asked quietly, "Do you know who it was?" The man hesitated again. "No name, just initials, NB." Sandra froze. Keanu noticed immediately. "You know who that is?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "Natalie Burnham. Who is she?" "My old publicist," she said. "She left the industry last year. She said she was done with Hollywood. But before she quit, she handled all my press for almost a decade." Keanu's tone hardened. "So she had access to everything, your schedule, contacts, home contracts." Sandra nodded slowly, realization settling like ice in her veins. "She was the one who booked that restaurant, too." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the engine. Keanu's eyes darkened with quiet determination. "Then that's where we start," he said. They drove in silence to the edge of the city, where Natalie now worked as a consultant for a small influencer agency. The lights inside her office were still on when they arrived. Sandra hesitated before getting out of the car. "What if she denies it?" "Then we listen," Keanu said, "and watch her eyes." Inside, Natalie looked surprised to see them. She greeted them with forced warmth. "Well, this is unexpected." What brings Hollywood royalty to my doorstep? Truth, Keanu said simply. Natalie laughed nervously. Truth, that's a rare word these days. Sandra stepped forward, her tone steady. Why, Natalie? The woman blinked. Why what? You sold the feeds, you gave them access, you turned our lives into a campaign. Natalie's smile faded slowly. For a second she tried to hold eye contact, but failed. You think I'd risk everything for a headline? You already did, Sandra said softly. Natalie sighed and leaned against her desk. You don't understand how this business works anymore. They were going to destroy your career, Sandra. The studio said you were fading. I just gave them something to make you relevant again. By breaking my privacy? By reminding people you exist, Natalie said coldly. You and Keanu together, that's power. That's nostalgia, love, redemption. People needed it, and you're welcome for the timing. You've never had this much attention. Keanu's voice was low but sharp. Attention isn't the same as respect. Natalie looked at him and smiled bitterly. You still believe in respect? You think this world cares? You spent years being the nice guy. They love you because you don't fight back. But I learned something. People only notice when you bleed. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, not of weakness, but of deep disappointment. You took my trust and turned it into content. I saved your name, Natalie said, and I made enough to walk away before the system chewed me up. That's not betrayal, that's survival. Keanu stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but heavy. You can justify it however you want, but you stole something sacred. Natalie shrugged. And yet you're both sitting here with the world watching again. Maybe you should thank me. Sandra's expression hardened. No. The world might be watching, but this time they'll see who you really are. She turned and walked out before her anger could break into words. Keanu followed, but before leaving, he looked at Natalie once more. You said people only notice when you bleed, he said softly. Maybe, but real strength is what happens when the bleeding stops. Then he closed the door. Later that night, Sandra sat by her window again, watching the rain slide down the glass. Keanu stood beside her, silent, steady. We can take this public, he said. Prove she did it. She shook her head slowly. No, not yet. If we fight her their way, we become her story again. Then how do we win? She turned toward him, her voice quiet but sure. By taking back our narrative, not through anger, through truth. You mean tell our version? No, she said softly. Tell the version, not gossip, not scandal, just who we are. He nodded slowly. You really think they'll listen? She looked out at the rain again. If we speak with honesty, maybe someone will hear it. Even if it's just one person, it's worth it. He smiled faintly. You're stronger than you know, she smiled back. Only because you remind me. Outside, the city lights reflected like stars on wet streets. And far away in another building, Natalie Burnham watched them on a screen, one final live feed she hadn't yet deleted. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, let's see if they're brave enough to tell the truth. The camera's red light blinked once, then went dark. The morning sky over Lowe's Angels was washed in a soft silver light. For the first time in weeks, the city felt calm, but for Sandra and Keanu, calm wasn't peace yet. They both knew what had to happen. After everything that had been taken from them, privacy, trust, control, only one thing could end this storm. Honesty. The night before, they had made a decision. No press statement, no rehearsed script, no filters. They would speak directly to the world, live, unplanned, together. By afternoon, a quiet hum had already spread through social media. Word leaked that Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock were planning to go live from her verified channel. Thousands joined within minutes. By the time the countdown ended, millions were watching. The screen blinked once, then showed them, sitting side by side in her garden studio. No makeup, no bright lighting, just two people in a simple room filled with daylight. Sandra took a slow breath. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced. She glanced at Keanu. He nodded softly, then she spoke. Hi, she said quietly. I'm not here to promote a movie or a show. I'm here because sometimes silence feels like a lie, and I don't want to live with that anymore. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. Weeks ago, something private between two friends was turned into a story for the world. Pictures, videos, moments, all twisted to fit a version that wasn't ours. And for a while, I was angry. I wanted to hide. But then I realized that fear only gives power to lies. Keanu leaned forward, his tone calm but certain. We've both lived in the spotlight a long time. We know what fame takes from you. Sometimes it takes your space, sometimes your truth. But this time it took our peace, so we're taking it back. He paused for a moment, looking straight at the camera. What you saw, those pictures, that dinner, it wasn't a stunt. It wasn't a story built for headlines. It was real. Two people meeting after years, talking, remembering, forgiving, that's all. But the world decided to make it something else. Sandra nodded gently. Someone we trusted betrayed us. They recorded us, sold what they saw, and built a narrative from it. And for a while, we blamed ourselves. We thought we should have been quieter, more careful, but now I see it differently. We weren't wrong for feeling. They were wrong for selling it. The comments began to flood in, hearts and messages filling the screen. People from around the world watched in silence, many typing but few sending. There was something sacred in the stillness of that moment. Keanu spoke again. The hardest part about being known isn't losing privacy, it's losing the right to be misunderstood quietly. Every smile becomes a rumor, every kindness becomes a headline, but we're tired of pretending. We care about each other, deeply, we always have, and that's not a scandal. That's just human. His words hung in the air like truth that had been waiting too long to be spoken. Sandra's eyes glistened. The world talks so much about love, but it rarely lets people live it without judgment. I don't know what happens after this. I don't know what people will say. But for me, what matters is that the person sitting beside me never gave up on kindness, even when everything tried to twist it. She turned toward him, her expression soft. "Thank you for that," he smiled gently. "Thank you for letting me stay." The comments began to change, thousands of them flooding with warmth. "We believe you. Stay strong. This is love. Respect." They sat there quietly for a few seconds before Sandra continued. "And to the ones who tried to break this story, who thought they could use it for money or attention, I forgive you. Not because it didn't hurt, but because carrying hate would only keep me in the story you wrote. I'm writing my own now." She turned to the camera again, her voice soft but certain. "We can't always control what happens to us, but we can decide what it means, and today this means strength." Keanu placed his hand on the table close to hers. Their fingers brushed not as a statement, not as a performance, but as something real, simple, human. "Truth doesn't need an audience," he said quietly, "but sometimes the world needs to see what honesty looks like." They both smiled faintly, and then Sandra ended the live stream with just 4 words. "Thank you for listening." For a few seconds, the screen went black. Then social media erupted, not with scandal this time, but with support. News outlets replayed the live stream, calling it the most genuine confession Hollywood had ever seen. People quoted their words. Hashtags turned into movements. Truth over gossip, respect Keanu and Sandra, #honest love, but for them, none of that mattered. After the camera went off, they sat there in silence. The garden was quiet. The rain had stopped. Sunlight touched the glass softly, and for the first time in months, there was no noise. Sandra looked at him. "It's strange," she said softly. "The moment we stopped fighting, everything got lighter." "Because truth doesn't weigh much," he said. "It just takes courage to carry it," she smiled. "And now," he said, standing up and offering her his hand, "we go outside." She hesitated. "They're probably waiting." "Let them," he said with a small smile. "We've got nothing to hide anymore." She took his hand, and they walked out together into the sunlight. The air was fresh after the rain, and the crowd outside fell silent as soon as they appeared. No shouting, no questions, just quiet awe. Keanu turned to her, his voice low. "Ready? For once," she said, smiling completely. They began to walk down the street side by side, surrounded by flashing cameras, but this time there was no fear. The light on their faces wasn't from fame or scandal anymore. It was from freedom. And as the crowd watched, something in the world shifted, a reminder that even in noise and chaos, truth still has a voice.